So, I don't know if many of you enjoy Korean dramas like many people do, but I wanted to start taking some recipes that I had been seeing in the dramas and then putting it on the channel, and if necessary, veganizing it. And so this next recipe I saw in the drama Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, and it was made by the grandma that was also in Squid Games. And they're essentially this, it's sort of like whole food plant-based because they're these potato balls where you grate everything and you get the starch first, but then you mix it back in with the potato pulp. And what happens when the starches are released and you cook it is that those balls become like, they're kind of bouncy. They have that chew, that QQ bounce that a lot of Asian people like. And I just thought it was a really cool recipe that, you know, if you have a lot of potatoes and you were wondering, okay, like what else can I do with this that's, you know, really creative, you can put it in a soup. It's really, really delicious. It's really, really good. So I hope you all enjoy. So I was making a couple of potato recipes, so this is more than 2 pounds, but 2 pounds is going to be what you need, and then afterwards we're going to grate it into a fine pulp. This was kind of a horrible way of grating it because there wasn't much room to grate, so feel free to use something electric. And something good to note is that I initially grated these into strips, and the recipe completely didn't work out. I thought that eventually the potatoes would break down, but it did not. And you need this to be in pulp form to have the texture correct. Okay, and then I think a lot of this was from the potato liquid itself, from grating it, but the amount of liquid that you add to this really doesn't matter because we're going to pour it out afterwards. So if you want to add in, you know, a cup, even 2 cups more water, what we're doing right now is just squeezing and rinsing out the starch from the pulp. The starch is what we want to get, and then we're going to save the pulp afterwards. So I did this for about a minute, maybe 2, and you just wring it out afterwards so that all of the starch is in the water, and then you get the pulp separately. Okay, so you just want to let this mixture rest, and then the starches will sink actually to the bottom. So I'll let it rest for 20 to 30 minutes. So you don't really get a lot of starch from 2 potatoes, but it turns brown just because it's oxidized. And this leftover bottom bit, if you carefully pour it out, that is pure potato starch, hopefully. So I'm just gonna add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt to that, and then add in the pulp. And this is gonna be, you know, super surprising because when you separate out the starch and then you add it back in to the potatoes, yeah, it's a completely different texture afterwards. You get like kind of more like chewy, almost like fish ball, you know, bouncy texture. So I am just going to kind of knead this until it gets together, until it's malleable. If you need a little bit more water, feel free to add that. So I'm just gonna generally make like a vegan style Korean broth here. I'm just gonna add about 2 cups of water. I have some onions. I think I ended up adding some carrots and spring onions, but pretty much to flavor it, I have doenjang, which is kind of the Korean, more flavorful version of miso. So you just add in, a teaspoon, 2 teaspoons of that to your liking, according to the saltiness level, and then add whatever vegetables that you want in here. So I would typically, make this with like tofu if you wanted like a full out vegetable soup. But we're putting in the potato balls, and they take about 4 or 5 minutes until they float. So it's actually kind of good that we kept the balls a little bit smaller, just because the larger they are, the harder they are also to eat, but the longer they take to cook. What's always quite nice about potatoes is it is its own thickener for soups. So you never have to add any extra starch or anything to it because it's already in there. So you just want to cook it until pretty much the vegetables are done, because now everything is done. Give it a taste for flavor. Some people like to add, could be a little more salt, sugar, maybe like vinegar, etc., etc. Honestly have such a nice bite to them. Like, if I had never made it before, I would not be able to even guess that the potato balls would have such a texture, right? Because it's so firm, it's bouncy, it gives back such a nice bite. But it's essentially all potato, so you would just never know it. So it's quite interesting to do it that way. I did want to say that if any of you are K-drama fans or any other types of drama, and you have a recipe from it that you're like, hey, let's see this puppy veganized, definitely let me know in the comments down below. And thank you so much for watching, and feel free to visit the Instagram, support the channel on Patreon. There's a Patreon page in the description as well. And I will see you all again next time.